When Congress defunded public media, thousands of you stepped up, increasing your monthly gift to help us survive year one without federal funding. We made it, but that loss isn't going away. So if you haven't increased your monthly contribution yet, now's the time. And if you're not a sustaining member, join us. A monthly gift to Boise State Public Radio gives us the steady, reliable support we need for year two and beyond. Choose the support tab at boisestatepublicradio.org.
More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Cadet. Dr. Bob Kustra served as Boise State's president from 2003 to 2018, overseeing a period of tremendous growth that included expanded research, new academic programs, major campus construction, record fundraising, and the university's emergence as a doctoral research institution. Before coming to Boise, he served as Illinois' lieutenant governor. He led the Illinois Board of Higher Education, and he has spent a lifetime thinking about the intersection of education, public policy, and leadership. He joins us at a really fascinating moment because Boise State has a brand new president, Dr. David Hahn, who officially took the helm just weeks ago after coming from the University of Arizona's College of Engineering. And he arrives at a time when the university is navigating leadership transitions, a changing political landscape, and big questions about how higher education serves both students and the state of Idaho. Dr. Kustra, we really appreciate you taking time for us today to have this conversation.
Great to be with you, Gemma.
So, Dr. Kustra, you've been in this exact transition yourself. When you think back to those first few weeks as BSU's president back in 2003, what surprised you the most about that brand new job?
I think the number of stakeholders that I had to meet and deal with was just overwhelming. When you look around the community, I think at one point someone said a president has 28 constituencies. And I don't think I could name all those for you right now, Gemma, but I think the fact is that there are many different stakeholders there in the community, and the president has to get out there. In a way, I think David Hahn's job is going to be really one of getting out of the office, getting to know his board members, getting to know key legislators, getting to know the media, and spending time so they better understand who he is. And of course, as I've shared with you earlier, I think he's the perfect pick for Boise State right now.
I want to get to that in a minute, but I do want to talk about maybe one of the first major challenges that's facing him, and that is the fact that he has to fill several interim leadership positions. Why, in your opinion, is building that leadership team so important so early in a presidency?
I think interim positions, especially the number that Boise State seems to be dealing with at the moment, is a really tough thing for the campus to understand and appreciate. You don't know where the direction of the university is going. You don't know how successful the university is going to be in dealing with some of its constituencies. So I've heard stories that there's serious concern on the part of the faculty and the staff as to where are we going? They're looking for a new leader. So in Dr. David Hahn's case, he absolutely has to be there for them. And while I say he has to spend a lot of time out of the office, he's also going to have to spend some time in the office building that team that is going to be so critical in helping him to be a success.
So for people who are outside of higher education, what do they often misunderstand about what a university president actually does all day long, every day?
Well, I think many people think that a university president marches into the office, rolls up his or her sleeves, and then dictates coursework and what faculty are hired and this and that and the other thing. That's not what it's like anymore. The university president is outside the office quite a bit. The university president is the face of the university, the voice of the university. And for presidents who make the mistake of delving into the details instead of leaving that to the provost, that's the vice president of academic affairs that has responsibility for the curriculum and for the hiring of faculty. They get into trouble. And again, presidents can get into trouble if they don't understand that this really is about establishing a face and a voice for the university and a plan of action, perhaps the most critical. Universities are great, by the way, at establishing strategic plans. They tend to take a year or two. They tend to be way too many meetings. And in this president's case, I think Dr. Hahn, from his experience at the University of Arizona, knows that he's come to this job knowing full well where Boise State University can go. And I don't think he needs to sit around in meetings for a full year to figure that out.
Higher education loves those meetings, don't they?
That's right.
With that said, as you mentioned, Dr. Hahn does come to Boise State. He's an engineer. He's a scientist. Oh, and you said, he's the perfect person for the job. Why do you think that his background is especially valuable for where Boise State is right now, but also kind of broader for Idaho?
Well, in at least two ways, if not three. First of all, I think it's important that Boise State's relationship and image gets away from the politics of the day of the last few years, where the state legislature has descended on Idaho higher education around the issues of diversity and inclusion. I think it's time for Boise State's president, along with the other university presidents as well, to really focus on what's the job of the university here. And in the case of Boise, this is a dean of engineering from the University of Arizona who actually belongs to an interstate compact in the Southwest that is about semiconductor education. And the exact same kind of interstate compact exists in the Pacific Northwest, where it provides national semiconductor workforce training. And so here's a guy who fits right into it. And he fits into an Idaho economy that is growing and one that Micron seems to be taking the lead. And you just can't deny the fact that Micron is now, in addition to everything else it was in semiconductor business, it now is a critical hardware provider for the artificial intelligence boom. And along comes Dr. David Hahn, who is perfectly situated in terms of his background. He has at least a dozen patents, 130 new scholarly news articles of one kind or another. I mean, this guy is the real deal. And I think it's going to allow the legislature and Dr. Hahn to establish a relationship not built on politics of the day or yesterday, let's hope, and more on how can we build this Idaho economy? How can we help Idahoans become better job seekers and better at their jobs?
How important is it, do you think, that David Hahn, as president, he actually already speaks that language of engineering, right? Of innovation, of those changes that happen with innovation. How does that form the conversation potentially with lawmakers, but also with industry leaders like Micron?
Oh, I think Dr. Hahn, they must have had a celebration out at Micron when his name was announced. I mean, this is music to the ears of Sanjay Mahatra, the CEO out at Micron. I mean, there's no doubt there's going to be a symbiotic relationship here. Frankly, there's been a symbiotic relationship with the Boise State Department of Engineering or College of Engineering for a long time, but this just ramps it up. It ramps it up totally. And I could just see Sanjay Mahatra and Dr. David Hahn sitting down for lunch talking about the future of the Idaho economy, the future of Micron. Anybody driving by or flying over Micron can see where it's going. And here's a guy who can help take it there. And most importantly, provide jobs for Idahoans. I mean, in the long run, that's what the governor certainly cares about. It's what the legislature cares about. And now they've got somebody in this new presidency who I think can pull it off.
You have spent time in politics. As I mentioned, you were the lieutenant governor of Illinois before taking over the helm at Boise State. Does that combination give you a unique experience or appreciation, rather, for that balancing act that university presidents, in particular here in Idaho, face with the state legislature?
Well, it did for me, but I would be the first to acknowledge that the legislature was very different in my day
Mm.
compared to the legislature here in Idaho today. And for that matter, legislatures across the country. They've grown more conservative. They've concerned themselves with issues that didn't even make the conversation years ago. Diversity and inclusion would be one of them. So yes, I was considered a member of the club. I was an ex-legislator, and therefore they thought I understood exactly what they did and had respect for what they did. And the fact is, I did. But does that really is that absolutely critical to the future of a university president? And the answer is no. It may have been a slight
Mm.
advantage for me, but the fact of the matter is, Dr. David Hahn's resume will take care of itself when it comes to whether or not he's going to be successful in the legislature. Because there are enough legislators, and the governor certainly, who care deeply about this economy and want Idaho to grow and want Boise State to play a prominent role. And in this particular case, I think Dr. Hahn's going to do it.
So you mentioned skepticism. I mean, you have said in the past that this can be a difficult moment for higher education in states where universities are sometimes viewed with that skepticism, and I think that's a fair statement about how some lawmakers within our legislature view higher education as a whole, right? Not just a particular university, but the need, the necessity for higher ed, to fund higher ed. So if you were giving Dr. Hahn one piece of advice when it comes to earning trust with legislators, what would that be?
Well, find someone who is respected greatly by the legislature and have that person at your side every time you meet with a legislator, you communicate with the legislature, you appear before the legislature. In my day, the former Speaker of the House, Bruce Newcomb, was the person I visited the legislature with. Highly respected, a guy that could really help legislators understand who we were. And if anybody thinks I was successful when it comes to dealing with the legislature, they didn't know the fact that Bruce Newcomb was standing next to me at every turn. And I hope the new president can find someone whose character and experience and background is as great as with whom I had to deal.
So, Dr. Kustra, one of the biggest debates nationally is whether universities, have become too politically one-sided. How do you think a public university can genuinely, encourage intellectual diversity without sacrificing what some would call academic freedom?
Well, it's a tough one, Gemma. There's no doubt about it. As far as I can see, Boise State has made an effort in recent years to do something about that. There is something called the Institute for Advancing American Values, and it was created specifically when the state legislature really criticized Boise State for just being another one of those liberal universities. And I don't think there's any question about the fact that if you look at most American universities, they're going to tilt to the left rather than the right. There may be departments within them that don't, but overall, I think that's been the tag that universities have had to deal with. So you do that. I mean, it's simple in a sense. You do that by making sure that students have exposure to all points of view, not just the point of view of one faculty member who marches into a classroom and decides to give his or her version of reality. And that can be done not necessarily in the classroom. It can be done outside the classroom. That's what the Institute does. The Institute brings speakers in to share their ideas that may not be the ideas of a majority of faculty in one particular department. I just think universities have to work at that. I must say that when I was president, I didn't have to work at that as much because it wasn't as much of a concern. I heard talk about the fact that, yeah, you guys are all liberal universities, but no one seemed to care to do anything about it. Now we have state legislatures out there and a Congress that definitely wants to do something about it. And they're not entirely wrong in making sure that we have the same kind of diversity in our intellectual thought that universities like to pride themselves on among their staff and their faculty.
So how do you think about creating an environment then where students, right? I mean, because this is ultimately about students who come to any university with very different worldviews, very different viewpoints, very different lived experiences, where they actually can learn from each other. It doesn't mean they're going to change somebody's minds, right? But where there's an environment where people can feel comfortable enough to express differing viewpoints.
Well, I think if you take a look at any university today, you'll see that there is the opportunity for students to speak up in class, share their views, whether they agree or disagree with the faculty member. But the problem in the classroom is whether or not that will be affected in the grade. And some students may feel like that's not the place where they want to speak the absolute truth as far as they're concerned. So that's why I think extracurricular activities of one kind or another, clubs of various kinds, lecture series of various kinds, debates between and among faculty, so students can watch their faculty debate subjects and take pros and take cons. We may not have done enough of that over our recent history, and it would be a good idea for Boise State or any university to stage that kind of discussion and make sure that there's at least two prominent points of view that can be debated and discussed.
I want to talk athletics for a minute, because Boise State football has become one of the university's defining brands. Where do you think athletics fits within the broader mission of a university?
Well, Gemma, I always applauded Boise State football for giving the West Coast a good look at Boise State. And today, when these students start coming through next month as freshmen, take a look at how many are from California, how many are from Washington and Oregon. I mean, the West Coast has just done an enormous job for Boise State when it comes to sending its students this way. So I have a lot of respect for the role that football especially has played at Boise State. But having said that, I also had this little thing I'd tack on to the end of a number of my speeches where I'd say, just remember that Boise State is a university that happens to have a football team. It is not a football team that happens to have a university attached to it. And that must be remembered by anybody who's dealing with this, especially state board members, especially the president, the staff. Athletics is important, but it is not the true mission of the university. If athletics was wiped off the face of the map tomorrow, we would still have a university here. And it's awfully important for us to recognize that students come here to learn. And what they choose to do Saturday afternoons at a football game is recreation. And we can never forget the fact that when it comes to funding, when it comes to priorities, when it comes to messaging especially, it should be about the university, not about a basketball team or a football team or any other team. It should be about the university and its academic mission.
You mentioned funding. I mean, philanthropy played a major role in Boise State's growth during your presidency. What did you learn about inspiring donors to invest? I mean, not just in the buildings, not just in athletics, but in the long-term vision for the university.
Well, what I learned is that the donors really aren't going to understand or appreciate uh, a donation to a university if they don't understand where it's going and who's going to be using it, who's going to benefit from it. And in my experience, it's simply a matter of taking faculty who are engaged in research and introducing them to people with means and making sure people with means understand that this faculty member is the reason why we ask for your funds. This faculty member is the key to the research that's going to solve a problem in the larger workspace or world space that we operate in. And so I think more than anything else, it's just a matter of connecting faculty to donors. And that's not always easy to do, but I could count any number of cases where when you do it correctly, donors will respond with funding that helps the university sustain itself and succeed.
I think it's fair to say that Boise State today is an incredibly different institution than the one you inherited back in 2003. When you walk around campus today, what do you see? I mean, what is the legacy there for you?
Well, I see the Center for Fine Arts, the center that we create, the Visual Arts Center for the Visual Arts, I should say. To me, it signifies the fact that a university must be all things to all people, that a university must have an array of disciplines, an array of faculty that cover the waterfront when it comes to what students choose to study. And for me, the building or the project I'm most proud of is the Center for Visual Arts, because we wanted it to demonstrate that on one end of campus, we have a College of Engineering. On the other end of campus, we have a Center for the Visual Arts. And please understand that those are only two of the many disciplines that are on our campus, but it shows the diversity that we pride ourselves in. And I think that more than anything else is really what makes Boise State able to call itself a university instead of a training ground of some kind for folks who are just looking for a job.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest challenges universities are facing today is really convincing families, convincing students that a college degree is actually still worth the investment. How should public universities demonstrate that value?
Well, it's becoming increasingly difficult because of the economy. So I think it's really time for the universities, first of all, to stop and analyze just what they're preparing students for, and to be public with parents. It'll be a few weeks from now, parents will be showing up with their students for orientation sessions. And those orientation sessions are more important now than ever before, because what you really need to hear as a parent is, okay, your student wants to major in this, well then here's where to go with that degree, and here's where it's going to work for you, or here's where it's not going to work for you. So I think it's a matter of universities really rethinking their majors and where their majors have taken their students, and then asking the toughest question of all: will artificial intelligence affect this major? And if so, how? And if so, what can I do about it now? How can I better prepare myself? I think we spend so much time applauding the STEM majors that we sometimes overlook the majors in the humanities, for example, where you tend to develop context. And it's awfully important for students to leave the university understanding the role that context plays in our lives, the ability to jump from one subject to another, from one issue to another, and still hold your ground and be intellectually grounded in your discipline. I hope that makes sense, but again, it seems awfully important to me that universities are spending more time helping students understand where their majors are going to take them.
I have just under a minute with you. What do you think success will look like for Dr. Hahn and Boise State, let's say 5 years from now?
Oh, I think it's going to be great. I really do. And I must say that I think that I don't want to, I'm talking about Micron all the time, but Micron is the 600-pound gorilla here in Idaho right now. And I think with Dr. Hahn's background, he is uniquely qualified to help both the governor and the legislature understand the importance of higher education funding. And remember that old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. Well, guess what? If Dr. Hahn is successful in the legislature and with the governor, the funding that he brings back, it's not just about engineering. It's not just about science. It's also about the humanities. It's also about staffing. It's also about programming that students need to make them better students. And so more than anything else, I think this is about a time when the legislature and the governor can build incredible confidence in the university, thanks to someone who comes to the job uniquely qualified.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your perspective. We've been talking with former Boise State President Dr. Bob Kustra. And thanks so much for listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. Do you have thoughts about today's episode? Make sure you email us at idahomatters@boisestate.edu or reach out on our socials. If you learned something from this episode today, share it with someone else who needs to know about it.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. Follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.